Hey, it's your old pal Dr. Steve, and welcome to the SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 Updated Situation Report for May 31st, 2020. This is the 10th in a weekly series. Previous episodes are available and have general information about the current pandemic, antivirals, vaccines, and basic science that are not covered on a weekly basis. Okay, let's get started with the statistics we're following this week. So the world added around 700,000 plus new cases last week. The United States is up to 1.77 million cases. Last week was 1.622 cases. We're sitting at 534 cases per 100,000 people. And deaths per 100,000 is sitting at 31. The United States ranks 10th in deaths per 100,000. In the world, last week ranked 9th, so higher numbers better. Brazil is still in second place at 498,440 cases. They rank 17th for deaths per 100,000. And last week we're at 347,000 cases. In Russia, still holding on at third place with 396,000 cases, but only 3 deaths per 100,000. I think this reflects, rather than bad reporting, rather this is very localized in probably urban areas, and Russia is a huge country and there are places that haven't been touched yet. We're still at a linear increase, indicating that the R0 is approximately 1. Remember, if the R0 is greater than 1, you start to see exponential increase. And when the R0 is less than 1, you see a decline, and or a leveling out in this case, because this is cumulative cases. And when it's right around 1, you're going to see a linear increase. In other words, one person gives it to one person. So if you have 20,000 people get it today, they give it to 20,000 people tomorrow, and you will still see the same number of cases increasing over time. New cases in the United States do appear to be trending downward, although it's a slow trending downward, but a trend downward nonetheless, which is very encouraging. And we've been following Georgia, which was one of the first to just sort of have this reopening, even though they weren't quite to phase 1 opening criteria. And disaster has not occurred. Apparently, the stay-at-home order expired on May 1st, and you can see rather flat new hospitalizations. Matter of fact, the most recent data set showed the number of new hospitalizations falling under the 20-day simple moving average. And here are their new daily cases, which shows a definite, albeit slow, trend downward, which again would imply that the R0 is less than 1. So we'll see. As people start doing more and more things, we're concerned about a resurgence of this virus, and we'll stay on top of that. New York, new cases declining. That's a definite decline. Well done, New York. However, California, not so much. Definite trend upward now. These are new cases. This could reflect simply increased testing in California. And that is very likely a cause of this increase. The more testing you do, the more cases you're likely to turn up. The interesting statistic, which I don't have here, why would I have the most interesting statistic, would be the ratio between the number of tests done and the number of positive tests. I'll see if maybe I can get that for next week. So we're going to concentrate on one topic, or the most important topic of the week going forward. And today, the vaccines have been in the news, and we're going to focus on Moderna. So Moderna has entered phase 2. And remember the phases of vaccine trials. You have a small safety trial first, and then you have a small efficacy and safety trial. In other words, does it work and does it still seem safe? Then phase 3, if phase 2 is successful, looks at much larger numbers in the thousands. When you have large efficacy and safety trial, you're picking up those more rare adverse events. Then you go to marketing. Then you go to phase 4, which is post-marketing safety surveillance. And once you're treating millions of people now, you can pick up those really rare adverse events. So they're in phase 2. This is an mRNA vaccine, which we talked about at some length last time. It did pass its initial safety checks, and they moved from lab to human trials in 63 days, which is something of a record, by the way. The preliminary findings showed that healthy subjects produced neutralizing antibodies, but they only reported 8 out of the 45 that did that. So does that mean they only tested them, or were the other group in the 45 did not show neutralizing antibodies? If that's the case, they've got some work to do. It's also unknown whether those antibodies were protective, because that's not what this phase 1 was for. Remember, phase 1 is 40 to 50 people, in this case 45. You give it to them, make sure you're not killing them, and that there aren't horrible adverse effects that are obvious right up front. And then you can do some things like, hey, did they develop antibodies or not? But the next study, which will be phase 2, will look at things like efficacy. Is it effective? And if this pans out, this will be the first mRNA vaccine licensed for human use that's been approved so far. They're looking at doing phase 2 with 600 participants at 8 states and 10 sites. And this trial will start June 1st, which, as I'm recording this, will be tomorrow. So, Godspeed. Let's just talk a little bit about mRNA vaccines, because they're a little different than what we're used to. Normally, vaccines work by injecting inactive viruses or viral proteins, the whole thing. So in the case of COVID-19, one strategy would be to synthesize or have bacteria or some other organisms grow spike proteins and then just inject those into people, which is great unless the thing mutates, and then you got to start all over again. But these proteins or the inactivated viruses are recognized by the body as foreign, and they elicit an immune response, which includes more than just antibodies. There are T cells and B cells and other things that are involved in this. The first attempt at kind of vaccination was this thing called variolation, which went back into the 1700s and maybe even before, in some places in 1100 and possibly even earlier than that, where smallpox fluid was dried, so the virus was inactivated, and they were blown up people's noses or placed under the skin. Placing it under the skin was more common in Europe, for example. Edward Jenner developed the first scientific protocol using cowpox virus to vaccinate against smallpox, although he wasn't the first either to vaccinate or to notice that cowpox seemed to protect against smallpox. Milkmaids, people that were working with cows and milking cows, frequently got cowpox, and it was common knowledge in the milkmaid community that if you got cowpox, you wouldn't get smallpox, that they were protected. And at first it was passed off as a myth, and through some epidemiologic research, it was found that maybe there really was something there. So Edward Jenner was the first one to look at this truly scientifically. mRNA vaccines work differently. They code for the production of the viral protein or protein, so you're actually getting the body to create its own vaccine. You inject the mRNA into the host, and the host cells take up the mRNA and produce the viral proteins, and then the body mounts an immune response to those. And here is a graphic that I stole from the HMS COVID-19 student response team. And so you take this mRNA, and you can't just inject it nakedly. You want to embed it in a fat globule, because those fat globules can then hit a cell and then integrate into the cell, driving the mRNA into the cell, where ribosomes, which are these really cool molecular machines, can transcribe the messages on the mRNA and create new proteins. And then those proteins enter the bloodstream, and the immune cell perceives the protein as if you had been infected, and then you create an immune response that includes antibodies and cellular immunity as well. Pretty dang cool. So we've learned from the viruses. This is how viruses reproduce themselves. Well, we're going to use their trick against them. Benefits of mRNA vaccines include the fact that they're faster to produce. Rather than trying to force some bacterium or yeast by integrating into their DNA the codes to make these proteins, you can just take the messenger RNA, which you can easily synthesize in the lab, and these candidates are ready to test in days rather than weeks or months. They may be more resistant to viral mutation, although the mechanism of that I'm not 100% sure on. I'd like to have a virologist on the show someday and discuss that. And DNA vaccines are widely used in veterinary medicine right now, from what I understand. The mRNA vaccines were not successful in humans initially, and they failed to produce an immune response. And then researchers at University of Pennsylvania in 2005 induced a slight chemical change that stabilized the mRNA, and the resulting vaccine or strands of mRNA caused less adverse effects and a much more stable vaccine. And then companies became more interested, including ModRNA Therapeutics. So ModRNA Therapeutics became ModRNA, which is now known as Moderna. The first application was to use mRNA to reprogram stem cells to treat cardiovascular disease, but they also developed a Zika mRNA vaccine, which showed positive results that were published April 14th, 2020, so just recently. So this is a new technology, but it's looking very promising. This is what we're up against. Here is a cell that has been infected by this virus, and all the red little dots are, these are false color, obviously, are new viruses setting out into the world to infect other cells. So you can imagine, when you multiply this by billions and trillions of cells, this is going on all through your body. It's a real problem. Well, this is how we win. There's the stupid virus with its dumb spike proteins. And then here are the neutralizing antibodies coming in for the kill. And they don't really kill the virus, but they can block it from implantation on cells, and they can also signal to the cellular immune system that these are foreign proteins that need to be dealt with and summarily disposed of. So, suck it, COVID-19. You stink. I hate you. All right, Pfizer has a vaccine candidate. The CEO of Pfizer states the vaccine could be ready before 2021 and as early as October if they hold their mouth right. So as rates of infection decrease, however, testing against natural infection becomes problematic, right? Because when you have a very small portion of the population that is coming down with this virus, just vaccinating 1,000 people and just waiting around to see if fewer of them get the disease is a problem, because it takes a long time. So challenge studies become necessary. That's where you give someone the vaccine and then spray COVID-19 viruses, SARS-CoV-2, up their nose and see if they get it. There are some ethical issues with this because this is a known deadly disease. I'm in a high-risk group. I will be the first to sign up for this because I think challenge studies are the way to quickly get a viable vaccine to market, and I don't think we've got a lot of choice. Edward Jenner, of course, didn't worry about such things. He vaccinated a kid with his cowpox vaccine candidate, and then later just deliberately exposed the kid to smallpox and just hoped for the best. Thankfully, the kid proved that he was completely immune to smallpox, and modern vaccinations were on the way. So until next time, stay healthy. Reopen according to your state and local recommendations, but be smart. Social distancing is still required in phases 1 and 2. Wash your hands, wear a cloth covering over your mouth and nose when social distancing is difficult. And please don't lose hope. There is absolutely light at the end of the tunnel. Check out our Twitter at Weird Medicine. Check out the podcast at riotcast.com/weirdmedicine or iTunes or anywhere where you get podcasts. And our SiriusXM show on Faction Talk. SiriusXM 103, 8 p.m. Saturdays Eastern, 5 p.m. Sundays Eastern, other times at Jim McClure's pleasure. And even better, on demand. You can listen to it anytime you want, 24/7. All right, we'll see you next week for the Weird Medicine COVID-19 Situation Report. Take care, everyone.